The eyes of the world are on the Supreme Court of India. It is a hearing case that could possibly have ramifications across India, across Asia, and of course, across the world as well. Should same-sex marriages be legalized or not? That's the question before the top court. Today, the judges in their wisdom referred this case to a 5-judge constitution bench. They also decided to live stream proceedings, which will start from April 18th. The court understands the gravity of this question. The Chief Justice of India has called it a matter of seminal importance. Maybe years later, history books will reflect the judicial deliberations behind this case. Good it's being live streamed. But unfortunately, the government of India wants to be on the wrong side of history. The centre has filed an affidavit opposing the legalization of same-sex marriages. Their arguments are outdated and borderline unscientific. Let me quote the relevant parts from the government's affidavit. They say, the notion of marriage itself necessarily presupposes a union between two persons of the opposite sex, essentially saying that only men and women can get married. They also say, all personal laws and statutory enactments dealing with marriage recognize a union between a man and a woman only. The centre says families must be heterosexual. It says that the concept of live-in relationships between same-sex couples cannot be equated with a family. Why? Because the government says a family involves a biological male, a husband, and a biological female wife and children. Like I said, it's an outdated argument. The centre also had a couple of warnings against legalizing same-sex unions. Listen closely to this. This is what they have said. They say, giving legal recognition to same-sex marriages will give rise to a lot of complications in issues related to divorce, adoption, maintenance, inheritance, etc. It is therefore necessary that such issues are left for being decided by the competent legislature, where social, psychological, and other impacts on society can be debated. In other words, complicated, but in other words, in simple words, this is what the government is saying. The centre is asking the courts to not interfere. Instead, they want the matter to be decided by Parliament. They say it's a policy matter. It's important to note that the Indian government isn't alone. Most governments have used the same argument to deny marriage rights to same-sex couples. Religion and so-called traditional family notions. Law Minister Kiran Rijiju today spoke about this in Parliament. He says the government won't interfere in personal lives, but issues like marriage involve policy frameworks. Therefore, let Parliament decide on whether same-sex marriages should be allowed in this country or not. Listen in.
Government is not interfering into the personal life, personal activities of anybody. So there should be no confusion or there should be no dilution in this matter. When it comes to an issue related to the institution of marriage, then it is a matter of policy. Personal freedom and personal activities of individuals, of the citizens, have never been questioned, disturbed or regulated by government.
Now, the case itself promises to be an exciting one for the ages. The petitioners say the Special Marriage Act can be easily modified to include same-sex marriages. They also point out that the Special Marriage Act uses gender-neutral terms like two persons. In response, the centre talked about the psychology of children adopted by same-sex couples. At this point, the Chief Justice of India intervened. He said that adopted children of a lesbian or gay couple need not be gay or lesbian. The petitions before the Supreme Court challenged the Hindu Marriage Act, the Special Marriage Act, and the Foreign Marriage Act for not recognizing same-sex unions. If the court rules in their favor, it would be a historic verdict, one that could influence verdicts in countries in Asia, across the world as well. Taiwan is the only place in Asia where same-sex marriages are recognized by the government. Countries like South Korea, Thailand, and Japan are also debating this question. So this question is not just being debated in India, it's being debated in South Korea, in Thailand, in Japan as well, in Asia. In fact, the list of countries that recognize same-sex marriages is very short. Just 32 countries out of more than 200. Now, this list includes America, South Africa, Australia, Costa Rica, Switzerland, Canada, and Argentina. Interestingly, around 10 of these countries required legal verdicts to legalize same-sex marriages, meaning it wasn't the government that made the reform, it was the court. Therefore, it is important that the court hears this matter and we don't leave it up to the legislator or the parliament to decide. From the looks of it, if India joins this list, it will be thanks to the Supreme Court and not the government. So the verdict will be keenly watched by activists around the world, judicial systems around the world as well. The problem is many people still believe that same-sex relations are unnatural and against Indian culture. Let's try to understand and challenge those ideas tonight. Let me go across to my guests who are joining me this evening. We have Niharika Karanjwala, who is joining us on the broadcast. She's a lawyer for the petitioner. Thank you very much for being here. Udayaraj Anand is one of the petitioners in the case, and Mithun Vijay Kumar is a political analyst. Let me come to you, Udayaraj Anand, as one of the petitioners, and there are so many people watching you on Mirror Now this evening. I want you to help all of us understand why it is so important for the LGBTQ plus community to have the right to marry who they want to marry. Why is it important for you?
I think I'll answer that question with a counter question to all of the people who are watching this broadcast here today. Why do any of you want to get married? Why have any of you got married? Why have you been in a relationship with someone you love and then decided to take that to another level and go ahead with marriage? If it isn't a big deal for LGBTQ plus people, then why is it a big deal for anyone? Why does anyone get married? Right? We are not a different species of people from another planet who have any different motivations to get married than anybody else. The institution of marriage accords certain rights, certain recognition, and most importantly, a sense of dignity to two people who have, lived and loved each other and, want to build a life together and want to contribute to this society as a collective unit, as all other couples and all other families do. So why do we want to get married? For all the same reasons: to be able to raise a family, to be able to visit each other in hospital, to be able to transfer money to each other without worrying about taxes, to be able to, not worry that if I have to transfer money to my partner to buy bangan, that this is going to become later on a problem for when I file my taxes. I mean, from the mundane to the very fundamental question of dignity. That's why we want to be able to get married or have the choice to do so. I've been with my partner for over 17 years now. Like, where do I go from here if I don't get married?
Mithun Vijay Kumar, as someone who's on this debate, opposing that point of view and representing the government's point of view, why not? Why not? The fact is that gay sex has been decriminalized in this country in 2009. The next logical step is that we will legalize gay marriages. Why does the government need to step in and give out a affidavit as regressive as the one they have given it in court, saying if gay marriages are allowed, there'll be total chaos in society, that it'll cause complete havoc, and that marriages can only be between a man and a woman? We have been so progressive when it comes to abortion rights. Why so regressive when it comes to LGBTQ plus rights?
Can I answer? Can I answer? Hello?
Yeah, of course, Mithun, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So What I'm saying is, personal relationships are seriously nobody's business. And when it comes to giving same sex marriage a legal validation, there are some challenges as per the existing law, is what I think. And that's what the government is actually saying. So personal laws would become, deeply affected because of the legal definitions of marriage as per the existing marriage laws and laws of inheritance, because these are around the concept of man and a woman, and it's deeply linked to religions as well. Hindu Marriage Act. There are religious implications to this. Now, even if you consider the Special Marriage Act, man and woman still exist. So at this point, approving same-sex marriage is a challenge. So just look at the technicalities of this. How would you handle the matter of divorce? And all the marriage acts identify husband and wife, and how can that be defined in this particular case? So the whole issue is something that can be addressed by the parliament and not really by the honorable Supreme Court at this point, is what I believe. And no one is against domestic partnerships involving same sex, but as throughout history of human race, the institution of marriage has been understood as a communion of a man and a woman, and the whole concept is based on developing a family with procreation as one of its key factors. So why kill the traditional concepts by trying to forcefully fit same-sex marriage into the concept of a family? You can, give it a new terminology altogether or define it in a different way.
No, Mithun, before I will let Uday respond to you and what you're saying and the argument you're making, or I'll let the lawyer respond to that. But what's the religious question here? You said there's a religious complication involved as well. There's a religious question involved as well. What is this religious question?
So if two people, if same-sex people are to marry as per the Hindu marriage law, how is that possible for them? Because is there a religious definition to the same-sex marriage? I don't see that. Is that approved in Islam or any other religion? I don't see that as well. So that's the religious challenge that I'm talking about. And this marriage, the marriage itself is a product of tradition, and it's a concept that's closely tied to religion, is all I'm saying, especially in India. So how would you kill that whole thing and try to fit this into the concept of the legally approved definition of law in India?
Uday, would you want to answer that? Because I'm sure that is something that has come to you many, many times over the last 17 years that you've been with your partner. What's your response usually to that argument that is put forth? Because it's not just been put forth in court, it is something that is part of drawing room conversations as well.
I mean, just to respond to the couple of points that were made here, and look, the question of all of the different, the legal challenges or the operational challenges that may or may not come about as a result of a wider interpretation of marriage. I think that is a question of execution and implementation, but not a question of the interpretation of the fact that this is a fundamental kind of right to dignity. The Supreme Court in the past has said that dignity is very much part of the right to life. And in that sense, if it means that, a complex process has to then take place to operationalize that, then so be it. That cannot be the reason. Complexity cannot be the reason to deny people a sense of basic dignity. That's the first thing. Secondly, look, I can't speak to broader questions of religion. I can say that I am a religious person. I can say that I pray every day, and I find no contradiction between my faith as a believing Hindu, for example, with being a homosexual or wishing to be married to my partner. So and I don't particularly see how this goes against any core tenet of my religion in particular. And so I'm yet to hear from somebody a convincing argument on that. So yes, people do say it, but I think that's more, kind of leaning into a kind of status quo and inertia to not be able to really question and ask, what is actually the problem? Because we hear people repeat again and again that it is a problem. It's never been like this. It's never been like that. It's defined in this way and that way. But really, the counter question is, okay, so what is the problem that is going to be posed? Who is this going to hurt? Who is this going to harm?
Niharika, the debate we are having in our Supreme Court at this point of time is a debate that many courts in Asia are having as well. For example, in Korea, for example, in Japan, everyone is deliberating whether we can legalize same-sex marriages or not. My question to you is this. The government has said this, and people who oppose same-sex marriages say this. Why are you trying to shake the entire system up? If you try and legalize same-sex marriages, it's way too complicated. Too many things will change. Isn't one of the arguments that you're making in court that, look, let the Special Marriages Act be gender neutral, and that will cut down at least some of the complications? What is the argument you get against that?
Absolutely, Shreya. And one of the main arguments against the Special Marriage Act interpretation with a wider construing is that it's inconvenient. There are a lot of other acts involved because you can't really say anything with regards to religion connected to that. You can't say it defies religion in any way or hurts anyone's religious practices because the Special Marriage Act is supposed to be removed from religion. So they say, oh, it's an inconvenience. You'll have to change all of these other laws. But the question of inconvenience and the question of something being complicated and maybe taking time is certainly no right and certainly no reason to deny an entire section of people their fundamental rights. And we truly believe that in the Special Marriage Act, there is room and there is gender neutral language that leaves room for a gender neutral and expansive interpretation that will guarantee people these rights. I would also like to say something with regards to the tradition, as Mr. Vijay Kumar pointed out. Now, there have been several practices steeped in religion that, not steeped in religion, sorry, there have been several practices steeped in tradition and the culture of this country that the courts have changed because they were unequal practices, they were discriminatory practices, and some very easily come to mind. Sati is a practice that very easily comes to mind that was deeply steeped in the tradition of this country. Untouchability is a practice that comes to mind that was deeply steeped in the history of this country. All of those were changed because they were practices that promoted discrimination and they were practices that promoted inequality, and they were practices that promoted a denying of rights and basic fundamental rights to a large section of people. So when we have already broken tradition many times in order to extend rights to people, where is the reason to not do it now?
Mithun Vijay Kumar, just taking off from that argument, that Niharika is making, fact is, I again go back to 2009. Under the eyes of the law, gay sex is not a criminal act anymore. If gay sex is not criminal, I mean, what is the problem in legalizing that union? To me, it's just very simple. What's the problem in legalizing that union if the Supreme Court of India has already decriminalized gay sex? They can have sex, but they can't get married. How hypocritical is that?
No one is denying the permission to same-sex couple to cohabitate, but we have certain legal definitions surrounding marriages, is what I said. And I'm not a legal expert though, but Special Marriage Act does, although I understand that the Special Marriage Act doesn't bring religion into picture, but
correct.
It does define the,
Okay, I think we have a bit of an audio issue with Mithun. I will just try and reconnect that. Udairaj, would you want to respond to that? Do you find it hypocritical that in 2009, everyone had thought this is the beginning where maybe 10 years down the line, 12 years down the line, you will have gay marriages legalized as well, because if gay sex is legalized, then gay marriages will be legalized as well. Were you surprised at the government's affidavit that has been put in court? Yes, I do understand that even in 2009, the government was opposed to decriminalizing sex between two consenting gay couples. The government at that point of time, many of us had thought was on the wrong side of history. Do you think the government is being on the wrong side of history this time as well with the opposition they are bringing to court?
So here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say to that. So two things. I want to first say something hopeful, which is that when those debates were happening in 2008, 2009, and even before, I remember being, in school and college when these things were talked about, and maybe there was a very small amount of newsprint dedicated to issues like this that you really had to hunt for, which dismissed this, or some courts or some government's opinion about this was really taken as the final word, and that was that. And of course, it's been a very long struggle to go from then, where on very much more basic issues, we were kind of debating and still did not have much space or voice, to now being in a situation where this program is happening and this conversation is happening. And I think one of the incredible things that the Supreme Court's judgments and the decriminalization and the reinterpretation of Section 377 has not just been as a matter of law, but has also been, has also introduced a conversation and actually made it quite apparent that most people actually didn't really have a problem at all. If you look at these same debates in some other countries, they are extremely emotive subjects that really galvanize a lot of people. In India, it was really a question about it not having been talked about. And through the Supreme Court's interventions and, through the giants that petitioners like us are standing on the shoulders of, who've really done the hard work of bringing us to where we are, there's now a very intelligent conversation that we are able to have about the subject. And what that also tells us is that perhaps the society is not as bothered or as troubled by this at all. And perhaps this is institutional inertia on the part of the government. And I'm not going to, this is not about one government or the other. But at the end of the day, it is a question of people's basic rights to live with dignity. And the Supreme Court has always been at the forefront of helping to extend those rights, not just to gay people, but to all kinds of other people who've been denied rights in other ways, and pushed the conversation forward and pushed us forward as a society. And I think that's what is happening here. And very honestly speaking, irrespective of what the outcome of this is, I think just the proceedings in court today and on previous occasions on this subject have really moved us leaps and bounds forward in terms of the kinds of arguments that have been put forward by the lawyers of the petitioners, and also the reception that this has received in the court.
Okay, but Uday, are you being kind here? Let me put that question to Niharika. Niharika, is Uday being kind here when he says this is just institutional inertia and nothing else? Is there an ideological push to the opposition we are seeing from the government as well? Although, I mean, given the fact that this is seen to be, a Hindu government, as it were. The Prime Minister is the Hindu Hriday Samrat. That's the constituency you appeal to. And there are sections who have come out and say, "Hamare yahan aisa nahi chalta. Hamara dharm iski ijazat nahi deta." Is there an ideological push to this opposition as well? Or is it just institutional opposition, institutional inertia?
Shreya, my first instinct would be to say that certainly the opposition to same-sex couple rights has always emerged from the ideological sphere. That being said, what I will say is it's hardly like previous governments have thrown their weight behind this issue. I don't see other parties really throwing their weight behind this issue either. So, especially when things come down to a vote bank question, everybody tends to get a little nervous, get a little worried, not want to come out in support. That being said, I do truly believe that all of the issues that the center raised today are things that can easily be addressed via an interpretation of the legislation. It's simple. I do think that Uday is very large-hearted in his view of this and keeping up the hope of this. And I'm very glad. And that is what is required from people who fight to change outdated practices, a constant hope, because otherwise what else drives you except the hope that the situation can be better. But I especially thought that some comments were especially unkind, especially unfair, especially with regards to the idea that maybe same-sex couples can't raise children, and that got quite an emotional response from the petitioner's side in court, in fact. And one or two of the lawyers pointed out to the court that there are people standing before you today who have children of their own, and the idea that you need a mother and a father in a home in order to raise children with a certain set of values and with love and respect is, it's insane to me, frankly, that was even put forward. What about single parent households? What are you suggesting with regards to that? Where is the answer there? If a mother and father are required, then as soon as, God forbid, someone loses a parent, are we looking to bring the children out of that home? It's absurd. So I feel like these are arguments that are put forth and seem to be ideologically a very big deal, but when you actually come down to the brass tacks of it, it's not so problematic. As Uday said, even after 377 was overturned, there was no huge upheaval and whatnot. And I think you'll find that if we succeed in the way that we hope with our current petition, I think you'll find that there won't be any havoc there either. How does extending rights, fundamental rights to more people raise havoc? It simply is a situation that society rises to. And I believe that Indian society in general can be very tolerant and very supportive, especially with regards to granting rights to people.
May I just quickly add to that?
Mithun, civilizations? Yeah, go ahead. My last question will be to Mithun, but Uday, go ahead. You want to add to that?
So just very quickly, I mean, I completely agree with Niharika here, right? The point is, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. When Section 377 was being debated, some of the arguments were that this is going to, tear at the fabric of the fundamentals of Indian society. The fabric is completely fine. We're in the midst of a grand celebration of Indian culture at the moment. Nothing seems to, this fabric doesn't seem to have even a thread out of place just because 377 was changed. And I think that's very much the question of marriage. I mean, really, all married people, heterosexual married people, should ask this question, that if I was to marry my partner of 17 years, who I'll, cohabit with in any case, I mean, is something fundamentally going to shake in their marriages? I don't think so. And most people actually don't think so. And, Niharika brought up this question on single parent households. Today in the court, it was said, but then the question of adoption and what will happen if gay people start adopting. The question is, single people today are allowed to adopt. Single people adopt as it stands today. And so what we're saying is, if a single person can adopt, here's an opportunity for that child to have two loving parents instead of one loving parent. Does this sound so horrible that, a child that would have been brought up by a single parent, and all respect to people who choose to do it that way. But is it so horrible to entertain the idea that, two women could do that or two men could do that? I don't think so. I don't see what's so hideous.
Mithun, I'll give the last word to you as I wrap this chat. Gay or straight, everyone deserves tolerance and everyone deserves love. We all agree with that, right? Is this just the government of India being small-hearted? The Supreme Court has had progressive judgments in the past. Okay, go ahead. I'll complete my point after you have spoken. Is the center just opposing for the sake of opposing, to look good? I don't know in which quarters, because by the government's own estimate, there are 2.5 million LGBT plus people living in this country. And this is a figure from 10 years ago. I don't know what the real figure is right now, because obviously there is no census. But go ahead. Can you really deny these people the right to love and marriage just for the sake of it?
See, it's a very sensitive issue and no one can say this is right or that is right. But all I was trying to say was that no one is denying permission to, same-sex couple to cohabitate. But we have legal definitions surrounding the concept of marriage. Now, the legal expert was saying that, Special Marriage Act doesn't bring in religion, but it does define the age of bride and groom in a marriage. So how would you kind of how would you apply that to this same-sex marriage concept? So we are a country that has a problem in implementing even the Uniform Civil Code because of the cultural issues that are involved. So how can same-sex marriage be implemented, when it could hurt the sentiments of many communities? Because the whole concept of marriage itself is kind of traditional, and it would go against their definition of marriage. So although I understand that this whole, same-sex marriage is a unique area of human behavior that, culture and tradition might treat differently. So we have to treat it with some level of sensitivity is what I feel. So maybe the existing
Okay,
definition
I
of marriage may
understand
not
it is. I
apply to
understand
this,
where you're
but
coming from. I
yeah,
understand where you're coming from. You're saying it's a sensitive
and
issue.
answering the
Yes, this is a
yes,
sensitive issue. I completely.
yeah, and see,
It is a
there are certain
sensitive issue,
biological factors as well. There are
but
certain
I don't know
biological
whose
factors
sentiments
that
it's
are
going to. I don't know whose sentiments it is going to hurt, Mithun. I'm not
no,
sure
it's
about
a
that. You know, it
see,
was
it's a
said in 2009, the same argument was made. We happily accepted the judgment. Everyone happily accepted the judgment. Now again, the
see the
same
thing is,
arguments are being made. Same arguments. It will hurt sentiments of communities. What communities?
see, if I go into answering the biological aspects of things, I might be called an orthodox or something. But there are certain biological factors that are different for a
No, go
man
ahead,
and a
please.
woman, and it's through this union that the concept of family is born. So a child raised by two men or two women may not be this. I mean, it may not be the same as a child raised by a father and a mother. Now, if someone merely wants to focus on the biological drive instead of a lasting relationship upon which the basis of society is built, then they are giving up on the proper use of their biological drive is all I would say, although it's completely their choice. So it's a long
Uday
debate. I
is
don't think at this point we can
Uday has been
kind
in
of
a
fit this
relationship
into
for
the context of
17. Yeah, of course, it's a long debate. Of course, it's a long debate, and there are 2 points of views. But Uday has been in a relationship for 17 years.
no,
Uday,
that's
but
his choice.
I want to give you 20 seconds. I know I'm completely, yeah, that's his choice. I'm saying I have exactly 20 seconds, Uday, and I'll let you respond to 2 points that are often made. And Mithun is not the only one making. A, hurt the sentiment of communities, and B, how can a kid be raised in a family where you don't have a woman as a mother and a man as a father?
Yeah. Okay. Hurt the sentiment of community is why I think the question is,
Just can I add
who
to
are
that
these
one just
communities
one
that
more
need to?
question?
Please go ahead.
Can a child be deprived of a father's
Go ahead.
love or a mother's love in this whole concept of same-sex marriage? Is that right to do to a child?
Okay. So sure. So
Okay, I
let
will
me
not
first
respond.
say,
I want
this
to respond
question,
to that, but I'll let Uday respond.
the question of who is being hurt by this. I think that is the first question, and I go back to this question that have people been grievously injured by the reinterpretation of Section 377? I don't think anyone feels that the bedrock of society, culture, tradition, the fabric of family life in India has got threatened by this. This is the first thing, and again I'll ask the question. Who is this going to hurt? There's a special marriage act that already exists that allows people to be married outside the ambit of of a religious institution. And so within that, that is a channel that the constitution, that the law of this land provides to people to be able to be married outside of a religious setting. And this is just an extension of that, right? So it really need not have anything to do with one or the other community per se. I don't think it hurts heterosexuals as a community. I don't see why it may hurt any specific religious groups as a community. That's the first one. Second, why as I said before, one of the most incredible things about India is the diversity of the family already. I mean, you have extremely different kinds of family setups in India. People have children who are then raised by their brother and bhabi. You have children who are raised almost entirely by their grandparents. You have an extreme diversity of family structures in India today. You have the law allows for single parent households. So as I said, if no one seems to have a problem with a single parent household, what is the problem with a child having an additional loving parent? Um, and finally, there is now enough data across the world in societies where civil partnerships or marriage has been allowed for gay people, and gay people are raising families in many other parts of the world. And I think now there's enough scientific research to say and show that there is no deleterious impact on the minds or the upbringing of children. These children grow up perfectly fine in loving households. I think let's be much more concerned about children who are growing up in households without love. Let's worry about broken homes where children are growing up, children who are growing up in an environment of abuse. Let's worry about those things if we really care about child welfare. A child growing up in a household with two loving parents, I don't think
Okay.
this is the most pressing concern of child welfare today.
Okay, this debate, of course, will be continuing in the Supreme Court starting April 18th, and everyone's looking forward to it because there'll be judicial systems across the world who will be hearing very closely to the arguments that are made in India's Supreme Court. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much. This has been a most civilized debate. Everyone has been able to put their point forward without screaming at each other. So, Niharika, I'm going to thank you for that. Uday, thank you for joining us. And Mithun Vijay Kumar, thank you very much for joining us as well. With that,